how the website came about was actually a series of events that began as early as the late 80s or 1990, and that was when I was involved in helping with research in preparation for the homicide trial against Anita Williamson, whose son had died without medical care. And you can actually pull up a New York Times article on that if you search for this title. It says, "For Faithful in Small Church, a Jarring Charge of Homicide." And what the article brings out is that this child had leukemia, but the coroner said the child didn't die of the leukemia. The child died of anemia and something else, something that could have been, that if the mother had sought treatment for the leukemia, the child wouldn't have died of that. They didn't make the case that the leukemia would have been beaten, but that because she didn't seek medical aid, the anemia and whatever the other thing was overtook him. Heart failure. Yeah, anemia and heart failure. But here's the point, though, that they're making, that they said in that article that the district attorney offered Anita to get off with probation if she would simply promise that if something serious happened to one of her other two children, that she would promise to seek medical aid for them, not let the same thing happen. And she wouldn't do it. She went to trial for murder rather than simply promise to seek medical aid for one of her other two children. And this underscores the depth of conviction that people have when they're taught the way we're taught, when they believe what they're taught, that there is no circumstance that is going to cause a person like that to deny their faith in God if that's what they're taught is on the line. So as years went by, at another point, I happened to be with Ed Wilson, and as I'll bring out here in the paper, he's a premier expert on this subject. He's actually appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show as a result of this Anita Williamson trial. And he mentioned, though, one day that the writings of the original reformer, D.S. Warner, are different than we hold today, and that there was a point at which we made a choice and chose a path. Well, I pondered over that, didn't really get into much depth with him about that and the implications of that. But then later on, as years went by and I would see people dying of things that were treatable, and then at one point my wife, Sarah, went to be with somebody who was in that situation and who did die. And I began to study a little more then. And finally, one day I remember it just hit me that there is nothing in the Bible. I've scoured the Bible. There's nothing, and nothing's going to show up that actually states or implies that there's anything wrong with medical aid or self-help. So we're making that implication from something else. And that something else is that Jesus heals. So in 2013, I wrote a letter to Brother Ed Wilson. I said, I understand Jesus heals, but how is it that we make a leap from that onto a different logical track? Where do we get that authority to do that? And then 2 years later, I wrote another letter in 2015. And then after that, I met with Ed Wilson in person, and he agreed with me on the points that I made, that omission is commission. That was one of them. In other words, that God set boundaries to prevent people from straying into self-harm while trying to obtain favor or power from God, such as the prophets of Baal tried to do, for example. And one of them is that omission is commission. We are charged with committing what we could have prevented, and so forth, as we'll get into. So I asked for permission to quote him on that, if he agreed with me. Can I quote him on that? And also, would he mind if I send these letters, these two letters, the one from 2013 and 2015, can I send those around to other ministers and then quote that he agrees with my observations and conclusions in these letters? And he gave me permission to do so. That was in 2015. It was in September. So I waited another 9 months, didn't do anything, thinking maybe there would be some clarification. Or see, I'm a person who taught and believed this as well. I'm dealing with my own conscience and belief system, and we just can't be wrong about this. People live sacrificial lives, got confidence in their lives, in their teachings, And I'm not just a neutral observer here. My conscience and my thoughts are reeling. I don't want to make a mistake. So I wait 9 more months. And so in 2016, July 4th, 2016, I sent the letters around to about 3 dozen prominent ministers. And I said, these are letters to Ed Wilson that he has given me permission to share with you all. He says he agrees with me on these points. So I'm asking you to look them over. Tell me if you see any error or if you also agree. And I pretty much got stonewalled. There were 2 ministers who immediately agreed wholeheartedly. And there was nothing else until I began to send some follow-up letters. And then I got one more response, and that one's in my website coming up. But pretty much a stonewall from everybody else. So finally, in the second follow-up letter, I said, fine, if you don't agree, you won't say so, or if you do agree, you're not going to say so, then I'll just take the matter public by publishing a website. And I told the ministers in the second follow-up letter, the website is going to be titled humansacrificeiswrong.com, to make a clear distinction that I'm not casting doubt that Jesus healed or that he still heals today, but that divine healing has no more to do with human sacrifice than drowning has to do with baptism. So that was 2016. Well, then one of the ministers did respond and said, go slow, I'm terrified by what you're saying and so forth. That was 2016. I waited another 6 years. So now it's 2022 and the website is going live, and I'm working on these audio presentations just to make it easier for people who maybe don't have the time or the inclination to work down through everything that's in the website.